God of War Ragnarok, 10 things players do not like about it. As incredible as Santa Monica Studios' conclusion to the Norse saga may be, there are a few small issues that displeased gamers. God of War Ragnarok from Santa Monica Studio is available for PS4 and PS5 and lives up to the huge hype with its story, characters, combat, exploration and much more. It's worth playing if you like the first game or action adventures in general. Of course, although it's loved by fans and critics alike, it's not quite perfect. It's pretty much perfect, but there are a few criticisms that have surfaced. While these don't tarnish the overall shine of the game, at least not too much, they do stand out from time to time. Let's take a look at 10 things players don't like about God of War Ragnarok. Requirements for the Muspelheim Challenge. Muspelheim returns, and unlike the first game, it doesn't just consist of a series of challenges until you fight the Valkyrie at the summit. Instead, you can complete different challenges at 3 different swords, from pushing enemies into the lava to killing enemies within the time limit. Once you complete all the tasks, each sword will give you a 3rd challenge to complete. The main attraction, however, are the 6 new challenges in the middle of the game. These are much more difficult, such as surviving against a never-ending onslaught of enemies while surrounded by lava, or a boss rush against elite enemies. It's pretty fun until you realize that you have to repeat the challenges from the previous swords in different combinations to get the challenge in the middle. Not only is this tedious, but it's also confusing when you have to remember which challenge was completed depending on whether or not a pair of runes glows in the middle. The final battle. God of War Ragnarok. After several years of waiting, players finally face Odin. The All-Father, the King of the 9 Realms, is finally here. However, in the first phase of the battle, he relies on Bifrost and projectiles, as well as a strange area attack that requires jumping between sections. The second phase is a bit better, as Freya joins Kratos and Atreus, and the spectacle of all 3 knocking Odin down is pretty cool. All in all, though, it's pretty tame. It's easy to dodge his shower of projectiles, and the slow-moving fireballs seem pretty inconsequential. For the final story boss of the Norse saga and the All-Father himself, one would have expected something more grandiose. Lack of grandeur in the boss fights. Odin aside, there are some truly bombastic battles in Ragnarok, whether you're going up against Thor for the first time, fighting Nidhogg, or taking on the badass berserkers. They're challenging and fun, but unfortunately they don't quite match the previous games in terms of scope. There's no Kronos to navigate through and systematically dismantle, like in God of War 3, for example, which is a good thing, since the Norse saga is something all its own. However, we do miss the scale of some of the boss fights from the previous trilogy. Pacing problems. Despite all the incredible action and emotional moments in which the story is told, some sections suffer from pacing problems. Jotunheim, more specifically Ironwood, where Atreus meets Angrboda for the first time, is perhaps the best example. What feels like a certain meeting and incredible revelation about the giants is dragged out. Granted, it provides an opportunity to become familiar with Atreus' abilities and his wrath form, and that's a good thing. However, it would have been nice if there was more to discover in the epilogue. Hasty ending. After Odin is defeated, Ragnarok shows up. You might think that this is the actual boss fight, but no. Instead, Angrboda appears and helps everyone escape. Asgard is destroyed, though many of the inhabitants were able to evacuate. And then it feels like an epilogue of sorts. Atreus goes off with Angrboda to seek more Jotnar, while Kratos becomes the new All-Father of the realms. Then he sets off with Freya and Mimir through the 9 realms to set things right. It's nice to see everyone get a happy ending, well, almost everyone, but Odin's downfall and Ragnarok itself feel like they're over way too quickly, especially after all the preparation in the game. Who blew the horn? For all the things the sequel answers, there are a few things that remain a mystery. In God of War 2018, who blew the horn and summoned Jormungandr? This happens after Atreus falls ill, so it's not him. Before the release of the sequel, some suspected that it was Androbota, since she spoke the language of the giants. However, this has remained unconfirmed. Perhaps it's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, but it's still a loose end that will keep us busy for a while. Freya makes peace. When Freya finally breaks her curse in Vanaheim, she finds herself at a crossroads regarding Kratos. Although she can't quite let go of her anger at him for killing her son Baldur, she finally realizes that he's not the one who needs to die. After all, it was Odin who was responsible for all her suffering. Kratos isn't forgiven, and he apparently doesn't want to be. Instead, the two come to a mutual understanding. Still, it's a bit odd that they work together without disagreements or bitter moments, especially after the curse is broken. Things seem oddly cheerful. Maybe it's because the rest of the game has yet to happen, but it can feel strange at times. Not wielding Mjolnir. At the end of Ragnarok, Thor and Odin are both dead. Thor's daughter Thrud inherits Mjolnir in the epilogue and sets out to make her father proud. Although it's somehow fitting that Mjolnir passes to his daughter, it also feels like a missed opportunity to pass the weapon to Kratos. One could debate the worthiness aspect of the inheritance, but since Kratos is to become the new All-Father, and Odin was more than capable of using Mjolnir, it might have been possible. Perhaps it would have been far too powerful for the post-game, or there wasn't enough time to implement it. Too many hints. As the story progresses, your companions keep giving hints and advice about where to go next. This can go so far that in some puzzles, or even in combat, they directly suggest what to do next. While these hints are very useful, especially when you get stuck, they can also be annoying for those who want to take matters into their own hands. Similar complaints were made against Aloy in Horizon Forbidden West when it came to solving puzzles, mainly because there was no way to disable or mitigate the hints. In God of War Ragnarok, it's more or less the same case. It might be different for everyone, but for some players it was a problem. Freya as companion, initially. After the end of Ragnarok, Atreus sets out with Androbota to seek the rest of the Jotnar. He and Kratos say their goodbyes, and Freya becomes Kratos' traveling companion for the rest of the game. While this makes sense, especially given the post-game puzzles that require her skills, she doesn't initially feel as effective in combat as Atreus. Perhaps it's because it takes a while to get used to her abilities, which allow her to root enemies, poison them, and even deal damage in her Valkyrie form. Or maybe we're just so used to seeing Atreus at our side. Either way, we'll miss the boy. Subscribe to our channel and wait for new videos on our channel.